All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Serious Angler Podcast. For anybody new that's tuning in to our show tonight, our main course for you here will be talking and hopefully teaching you some more about bass fishing. And, of course, on this program, that does not come without a distraction or 10 here and there. So whether you're here to learn or just hang out on this fine Tuesday evening, you guys are in the right spot. And as always, I'm your host, Bailey Egbert, and we're here with the Bassin captain, Mr. Andy Full. Going on, brother?
Not a whole lot. Wish I pulled the boat out today. I'll tell you that. I saw some pictures from Erie, and it was a beat down. And here I was running errands all morning, and I'm like, oh.
Ouch.
Yeah, I probably should have pulled the boat out. I mean, technically, I'm not allowed to guide after December 1st based on my insurance, so I can go out fun fishing. So it's like, now I have to drive across town to go get it. And the guy that my boat's in his garage, he was out on the lake. So by the time I called him, I probably would have had to break into his garage to get it out. And I don't even know if it's been plugged in. So it might have been rough. So got to plan it better.
So what you're saying is basically you have just serious FOMO of missing out on today.
Definitely had some FOMO today. Like a rare December day where it's 45 to 50 degrees, water temps low 40s, so they're chewing. And I'm sure guys caught 100 fish each today. And no wind, flat, calm, no wind. I drove by the lake twice, and I'm like, it's so calm. And I saw a couple boats out there, and I know that I looked at social media, and I was like, yep, I know who that was. Yep.
Yeah. It hurts.
Yeah, it hurts. Painful.
Well, there's the FOMO. It's twofold this time of year, especially because as I'm sitting at my desk, it's FOMO because I'm seeing the people posting about fish, or I'm seeing buddies that are still killing big bucks right now in New York. And then if I'm in the stand, I'll have FOMO about fishing. But if I'm fishing, I'm having FOMO about hunting. So it's always a case of FOMO this time of year for sure. But it's
the FOMO
it's fun when you can take advantage of it, because this time of year in the north, it's very rare that you can be out bass fishing in December.
Yeah, that's true. So unless you're Jeff Hippert, he'll go until there's ice in the harbor, and sometimes he'll break through the ice to get out.
You kidding me? He surfs the ice chunks out into Erie. What do you mean? He'll go out and ice fish in his Phoenix.
He's a wild one, and he's on him. So he's still guiding right now. He's still open whatever day's good. People are getting out with him. He had a trip today, and I haven't talked to him yet, but based on the pictures, I bet he smoked them. So because they were all big ones.
I would not be surprised. Not be surprised. But definitely a lot of fun right now fishing wise up in the north, and a lot of fun tonight about to go down on our podcast here. We got two absolute hammers and no strangers to the show coming to join us. Mr. Spencer Shuffield and Mr. Drew Gill, who we'll get to here in a little bit. We'll be talking about some forward-facing sonar, and perfect timing with that because Humminbird, actually, for folks that to keep you guys updated, Humminbird just launched their new Mega Live 2 as well as Explorer unit. So a long time coming, I think, for the Humminbird brand. So cool to see, and looking forward to see what comes of that. We'll have more information for you guys here soon on that, as we've gotten the opportunity to see it firsthand, things like that. So stay tuned to our social media and the shows as well to hear more on that. And I know Deacon over at Business of the Bass Boat's intrigued on doing some fish finder comparisons now going into 2025, as well as some four faces sonar comparisons. So you have that to look forward to on the channel. And so it's perfectly fitting that we get two hammers in their own right, but also two sticks when it comes to forward facing to talk to you guys about some ways to improve on your forward facing sonar game tonight. So we're going to get these boys on here in a little bit, but before we do so, it's just perfectly fitting this all lined up, Andy, because I would say one of the best forward facing soft plastics for the jig head minnow right now, the Z-Man Jerk Shads, is 35% off at Omni Fishing right now.
It's definitely top 3 in my arsenal. 100%.
I'm surprised it's not sold out already.
Yeah.
35% off in the first place. That's pretty crazy.
Are the scented ones on sale too?
That is, let me double check, because I don't want to be misquoted here, but I wanted to say it was the scented ones.
It's Christmas.
Yes, 35% off. 35% off Z-Man scented jerk shad. So if you have any money left over from Black Friday, just say you're just using your savings now to go and order these. But 35% off is basically another Black Friday. That's pretty ridiculous. Savings-wise.
They're $4.99 a pack. So they're what, like $2.69 now, roughly? Pack.
Hold on. $3.24 a pack.
I was close. So they're $5.99 or $5.29. Yeah.
Original price is $4.99, is now $3.25 or $3.24. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Either way, you're worth it. And so there's a bunch of stuff. Obviously, new arrivals we talked to you guys about last week. And then last couple things for you guys as we are going forward before we get these hammers on and start talking some fishing. Is we will have our yearly not so serious last show of the year coming up for 2024. I will be doing mine, thankfully, with some palm trees in the back, and I go see some family down in Florida for the holidays. But you guys will have that. We'll have a bunch of friends of the show. Again, it'll be the not so serious, so there will be some drinks flowing and some fun conversation as always. And upcoming between now and then, what's going to go up next Friday, actually. We're in the midst of filming it, and shout out to our boy Clint Bartlett, who is over with the Yamaha crew and does a lot of different stuff for some different brands around the fishing industry. A really good photographer, videographer. He's going to help me co-host basically a mega show of some of the best fishing videographers and photographers right now in the biz. And we're going to get, I think, like 10 or 12 of them on one show. And not all at the same time, but we're going to have each of them have their own individual time to get on. And it's going to be a lot of fun going through that and highlighting some of them. And we're definitely going to be missing some. If we did, we'd be having like 100 guests. But
there's so many good ones now. So many.
And that'll go up next Friday. But this Friday, we actually have a show going up with Matt Airy. We're going to get on. We're going to do a show about big buck behavior versus big bass behavior and how those two compare. Because we started getting in on that in the DMs, him and I just going down the rabbit hole. I'm like, dude, we got to talk about this on a show. It's just too cool not to. So you got that to look forward to. And, of course, next week's live stream. But a lot of fun stuff going on. More planning, obviously, going on behind the scenes for 2025. But I think without further ado, let's get on our boys here. We got Mr. Drew Gill, Mr. Spencer Shuffield. What's going on, fellas?
So, what is up, Bailey?
Dude, well, first off, I got to start with this. I know, Drew, we've had you on within the past year. But as we reached out to Spencer to get him on his show as well, I was sitting there. I'm like, man, I don't think it's been like 6 or 7 months since we've had Spencer on the show. And we get on here, start talking with Spencer, and he goes, yeah, it hasn't been since 2022, bro, that you've had me on the show. So
it hasn't we're been the jerks. That long, has it?
It is. I fact checked it, man. He's right. It's been 2022, and now I feel like a jerk. Yeah.
Wow. That year
we're a bunch of jerks, Andy.
The 2 years went fast.
Sorry. No, it's all good. It's fine. It's fine.
I feel like we just had you on last summer, but
yeah, time's flying. I'm getting old. I feel like.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 30, 32, 33, I guess last time we talked. 35 now. Crazy.
See, he understands it, Bailey. I'm 34 and I feel old every day. So he's got me by a year. So it only gets worse, Bailey.
Yep.
Sweet, Andy. Start our show by calling our guests old. That's great. That's great.
We're old, right? Like,
yep. Well, waking up at 4:30 every morning, can't go back to sleep. Getting tired of it.
If that's a 35 thing, I'm screwed because that's been me since I was 22.
Really? Dang it.
Yeah,
it's only when I know I'm getting up going fishing the next morning. That's the deal. I wake up, my mind goes to spinning. Where am I going fishing? How am I going to catch them and all that? I've been fishing pretty much every day right now. So since I got my new boat, not getting a lot of sleep.
Hell, if it's missing for fishing, that's a good thing then.
Oh yeah, it's worth it.
Drew, what are you? Are you a morning guy or a night owl? Which are you?
Spencer can attest to this. I'm not a morning guy. If they made it mandatory where we didn't start practice until 9 a.m., I would have no complaints. Not a bit. I love fishing, and I do it most effectively when I'm well rested. And I'm the same way. I don't sleep well whenever I'm about to go fishing the next day, especially when there's something on the line, being practice or a tournament. And so, even if I book out 7 or 8 hours to sleep, it's probably going to turn into 5 and change 6 hours real fast, and I'll wake up feeling rough. So it's one of those things where I'm not a morning guy, but for bass fishing, I have to be. And it's one of those things where really most of the battles the first 5 minutes once your alarm goes off. If you can get up, once you get to the lake, you're never upset that you made the decision. But it's that 5 minutes, 10 minutes after you wake up of like trying to decide whether you want to hit the snooze or not.
Oh,
Yep, it's it's the distance from the bed to the front door that is the hardest part.
100%.
Yeah,
it's the equivalent of a runner's first mile. It's always the hardest mile, right? The first one, and then once you get going, it's all easy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't relate to that because I don't run.
I hate it, but yeah.
Well, boys, quickly before we start getting into talking about forward facing and some tips for these folks, quick recap for you guys, I guess, on your takes of the 2024 seasons for each of you, and then how you guys are feeling going into 2025, being that it's been a minute since we had you both on. But Spencer, we'll start with you, man. How'd you feel about this past year, and how do you feel about going into next year?
Oh man, I mean, this year was fun. I mean, the last 2 years on the BPT have been pretty incredible for me. I mean, I've had a couple bad tournaments, but I've had several really good ones. I mean, I made top 10 in over half the events this year, so I can't complain about that. I struggle. I made a good check at Santee Cooper, but Eufaula and the Chowan are the two that really got me this year. I mean, they cost me probably finishing in the top 3 to 5 in the points, and it was one of them deals where it's just a battle. I mean, I fought a lot still in between old school and scoping, and if it's a straight scoping event like Toledo Bend, Del Hollow, St. Lawrence River, and I know 100% that's what I'm going to do, I never look back. But when I go to these events like Eufaula or Chowan or Santee Cooper, where I can catch a few fish scoping and a few fish old school fishing, those are the tournaments I do really bad in, because if I can go to the bank and catch them flipping or throwing a chatterbait or a spinnerbait or a buzzbait, I would rather do that. But at the same time, I know I can go out behind me and get extra bites scoping too, and I'm really good at that. It's like I'm in this battle in between myself all day, and it's like I've learned you have to lock in and do one or the other. Like, you cannot go to the bank for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and go out deep for an hour or 2 hours, and go to the bank for an hour or 2 hours. You're going to end up just screwing yourself. And so that's what I did in those events, that really hurt me. Other than that, I mean, those events where I knew I was 100% going to be stuck out there scoping or 100% just going to stay to the bank, I did really well in. This year, coming up, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot different. I don't think there's going to be quite as much scoping, and so that'll make the decision a little easier. So I'm excited about that.
Heck yeah, Drew. What about you, man?
For me, obviously, tremendous year for me, both for my career and just for my my life. I mean, to have a year like this, especially in my first season, fishing the big leagues. Is something that really, establishes it where, if I can continue to do this, I might have the opportunity to get to make a living catching bass, and like having the realization of that being something that you can actualize is really incredible. And so, it's something that I'm really looking forward to next year. I mean, anytime we get the opportunity to put our boat in the water in one of those tournaments is a tremendous blessing. And so I'm jacked up, ready to go about it. Obviously, it's been a major transition for me over the last few years. I fished in college, then went to 1 year of Toyotas, 1 year of Invitationals, 1 year of the Bass Pro Tour, and now for my second year of the Bass Pro Tour, we're doing it under a different format. It's been a deal where I've not had the opportunity to like settle into a system and get footing with the program that I'm fishing. With college tournaments, you're obviously fishing team tournaments for no points. Toyotas, you're fishing a little bit for points, but you're fishing tournaments with co-anglers in the boat. You're fishing, that was my big step to multi-day events, more than 2-day events. Then the invitationals, you're fishing solo. You're the only one in the boat. It's majorly about points across the season, and it's a 5-fish format. And then to go from that to fishing the Bass Pro Tour was another huge adjustment. So, to go from fishing the format we have over the last few years to the new format is another big adjustment. And I'm just looking forward to hopefully, obviously the industry has been a situation where over the last few years there's been, people talking of instability. Well, from my personal tournament fishing experience, I've never gotten the opportunity to have 2 stable years in a row. So I'm looking forward to getting out there next year. Hopefully, some of our new format changes are something that, people can grab onto, really enjoy, and that we can enjoy too as anglers, and something that, it brings a little bit of stability, because I'm ready to lock into a system and develop it, and that be what I take, going into the new year, and knowing exactly, rolling out in January, this is how I do what I do, and this is what I'm going to do all year. And that's something I'm looking forward to fostering. But obviously the season I had was incredible, to have the opportunity to, it's one of those things where you have to almost have a be real moment, because to have the opportunity to win an invitational, the Bass Pro Tour, the Show On, and a team series event all in the same year is something that, like, to be real, it's either, you got to go out with the mentality the next year of, I peaked and we'll never have a year like that again. I'm going to have to go and fish incredible. And, obviously as a competitor, you got to go out with the mindset of, I'm going to go and try and, be just as incredible as anything prior, or, try and, beat yourself, because ultimately that's what we all set out to do. We don't do this. We might say we do this to beat other people and things like that. We do it because we want to learn something new, and we want to be better than ourselves every day that we go out. And so that's goal number 1 for 2025. And I'm really excited to get it at Conroe.
Heck yeah, dude. Well, and to your point earlier, and I think Spencer can attest to this as well, is I think if you started at Major League Fishing from the first year, you haven't had 2 years of stability ever since then, with the format changes and everything like that. So I'm sure everybody's looking forward to a little bit of stability as well on that front. But
and what's the fun in stability? Keep changing things. Keeps it interesting.
Maybe as a fan, Andy. I don't know. I don't know if you're living in it, if that's too much fun.
Yeah, it's two different looks for sure, because instability and keeping things new is fresh. It's something that keeps people engaged. But for us, it's chaos at times, because we're trying to figure this thing out to try and make a living catching bass, and that's hard enough dealing with the bass as it is.
Yeah, and we're gonna come full circle with this, because I would love to, if we got time here at the end, to tap into your guys' brains on that, with the format being, and for folks that might not understand what we're talking about, or missed it in the all the rule changes during the early fall. But for you guys, you have only one period now where you can select to use forward facing sonar, so that's gonna make things pretty interesting personally. And again, we'll come full circle with this, but I'm a big fan of this, and I'm really intrigued to see what you guys where your head's at on system strategy and stuff like that. So we'll come full circle, but I wanted to get through and get to the topic of our show here, which is obviously forward facing. We're throwing opinions out of the window right now. We're going to actually talk about just facts, and for people that want to get better with it. And because whether some like it or not, the sales of forward facing sonar have skyrocketed. And a lot more people are out there with it on their boats. And I told you guys before we got to the show, is there's a lot of people that might have it on their boat, and they understand what the picture is showing them, what the transducer is portraying in front of the boat, but they might not know how to best use it, how to best use that into either catching a fish, seeing what they're seeing on the graph, and implementing that into their fishing. And that could be kind of frustrating, I feel like, for some people that especially are out in the abyss and getting lost, essentially, which I'm sure you guys have seen firsthand. And so hopefully we can help steer a couple of these people and give them some tips on how to better use their forward facing on their boat. So that's the premise of this for the folks. And I guess we'll start, Drew, if you want to take first here, I guess any tip for that person that's looking to get better with their forward facing sonar, whether it's efficiency with casting, whether it's using your trolling motor, whichever. What would your first one be to help somebody with their forward facing?
I think ultimately the first place that you got to look in terms of efficient ways to improve your game using the technology that we're given, our eyes underwater, is the mindset. Your brain is your most powerful tool, and understanding how to use it in this scenario is really important. If you try to convince yourself in any manner that there's anything more to using live scope, active target, mega live, whatever it may be, then the ability to see underwater, which granted, I say anymore as if that's not a tremendous, tremendous change, because it is. Sight is an unbelievable tool. Imagine if you have to navigate the world blind. You're at a major disadvantage over, your ability to do it with the ability to see. So it's a simple thing, but it's a really important thing, which is you're able to see underwater. All of us have gone to the bank many times in our career, especially whenever you got a place with very clean water. Whenever you don't understand and you're on a place with clean water, a lot of times, at least for me, I like to go to the bank or to wherever I can see and try and establish a visual just to understand what might be going on at the fishery. Try and see some forage, see what the lake's got to offer, maybe see some bass cruising or spook them from being set up on a certain object or area. That's the beauty of some of these northern really clean fisheries. And, when you have that opportunity, it's a great way to establish a baseline. No different when you have scope, active, target, megalife. You're using it to establish a baseline in the fishery, and you're using it for two purposes: to gather information and to actualize opportunities. Take opportunities at, catching a fish and turning it into a catch and not just an opportunity. But take a simple approach mentally, meaning that you are seeing underwater. How you got to translate it. Don't get me wrong. It's in a different language. It's like going from English to Spanish, but it's still the same words. It's the same words as your eyes themselves. It's just you got to learn how to translate it, but it's the same thing. It's vision underwater. And so if you take away the idea that there's, don't get me wrong, we'll get into settings and things like that later because I think those are partially important. But the most important thing is don't shortchange yourself by thinking that it's all about secret settings or secret baits and things of that nature. The biggest part of it is connecting your mind to what you see and processing all of that information. So understand it's just the ability to see and use your eyes to process what's going on.
I love that. For one, also, I think help somebody improve of using their forward facing, but also I feel like that is, and I'd be curious your guys' opinions on this, that unlocks the next thing of helping you learn more about the bass themselves and it was not as well
100%.
as just bass, but like other species. Once you can understand that, you open that in your mind, you learn way more about the fish themselves than purely just catching them. Spencer, what do you think, man?
I mean, yeah, like Drew said, there's not really any special settings. I mean, so many people get caught up on, we've got certain settings that are, secret settings or whatever and things like that. But it is truly just processing what you're seeing and making a determination from there on how the fish is reacting to certain baits. I mean, if I'm going, cranking out over a flat for smallmouth and I'm constantly seeing them chase my crankbait to the boat, it's either A, I need to change colors, 2, change crankbaits, or 3, change baits altogether. I mean, and I use live scope. I mean, when we went to a place like Toledo Bend this year in Del Hollow, that was straight up just going from fish to fish to fish, pretty much. Mm-hmm. I don't think those fish had ever really even seen a Damiki much. But when we go to places, when we went to like St. Lawrence River, for example, or I'm trying to think of another place where we went where I used live scope quite a bit this year and did pretty well. I didn't do well there, but Chowan, for instance, or James River. I made top 10 there, and I caught a lot of those fish scoping. It was figuring out where the fish were located. I will throw baits intentionally to pull fish up off the bottom or get a visual of where they're at, trying to find a depth range. If they're back more in the backs of pockets, middle of the pockets, the mouths, more main lake, are they relating to bays with ditches, banks that are steeper, banks that are flatter, secondary points, main lake point. I mean, all that stuff. It's all just trying to gather as much information as possible. So I use scope. I initially pick up a bait, which a jerk bait is a great search bait for pulling fish to it. I mean, fish are very curious. They're going to come check it out. I can pick up a jerk bait and get them to come to it, whether they want to bite it or not. I don't care if the water's 90 degrees or it's 35 degrees. A predator fish is going to make a move towards your bait. A carp, they ain't going to do nothing. Gar, well, heck, I mean, a gar when you see it on live scope, they look like a toothpick, And once you've used it a bunch, you can pretty much decipher what's a bass, white bass, striper, drum, crappie, because you start learning these fish's body language and the way they react to a bait, the way they move towards it. Crappie kind of glide a lot. Bass, you can see that old tail wagging. Drum, there's a pretty big, of course, I mean, well, Drew does too. He's got Garmin. Drum, usually they have a pretty good gap between the head and the tail, so it's almost like there's a void in the middle of their body as they're swimming. You'll just catch glimpses of their tail. Really big smallmouth, really big largemouth are kind of like that too, but they're a little bit more slender. Striper are really long. I mean, there's lots of stuff. I mean, you got to realize I'm out there 4 to 6 days a week using this thing, and I've been using it for 6 years. I mean, I've learned a lot of little tricks and stuff as far as how to process things when I see it. Used to, when I saw it, I didn't know exactly what I was seeing. But 6 years later now, when I see it, I know exactly what I'm seeing. And I'm able to duplicate that in other places of the lake. So it's cut the learning curve down for me a lot, because I can pick up a jerkbait and within 2 hours, I have an idea of the fish in 10 foot or less or 10 foot deeper. And not necessarily just a jerkbait. I mean, I can use it with a drop shot. I mean, depending on what kind of body of water on, I'll just take off and start throwing at fish with a drop shot until I start getting fish to chase it to the bottom. Necessarily, you know, I mean, or a Demiki. I mean, there's so many different ways to use it. Once you find where the fish are, that's when you can start rotating through baits, depending on what kind of bottom content, bank content, water clarity, water temperature, things like that. Then you can start evaluating what kind of bait should work best in those situations. So that's what I use it for more than anything. I mean, there's a few situations where you straight up just take a Demiki or a drop shot and go fish to fish to fish to fish and throw at them. But really, I would say 80% of the time, there's so much evaluation that goes into it. Our 2 days of practice that we get, when people like you guys actually see us on TV jacking them on scope, we have done a lot of homework to get to that point. It's not like we just showed up at the lake and took off 900 miles an hour just throwing fish. I mean, there's so much more than that to it. I mean, it's a huge art. There's so much more goes into scoping than going down the bank on a chatterbait or skipping a jig on our boat docks. That's luck. That is 100% luck. Take off, skipping a jig at down boat docks, pitching at laydowns, throwing a chatterbait over grass. That is 100% luck. You get out with live scope and you go out and you consistently catch them and make top tens doing it. That is 100% art and skill, because not everybody can do it. Not everybody can do it with a chatterbait and a jig either. But you can legit just take off down a bank with a jig or a chatterbait and get lucky and catch 5 of the right fish. I mean, we've all done it. But you know, not everybody can get out and take a Demiki or a drop shot and catch them. I mean, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of time, and learning what you're seeing, and when you see it, knowing what you've seen.
Numbers prove that out. I mean, over the last 5 years, bass fishing at top end of every field, the top 10 anglers out of every AOI, the numbers have gotten more and more consistent over the last 5 years. It's required more top 10s. It's required a higher average percentage finish. There's been more anglers dominating their fields because they've taken the time to understand the fish. They take the time to understand them and listen to them. They're taking these cues and all of these things in the environment that allow them to refine their ability to understand the largemouth bass or the smallmouth bass, spotted bass, whatever. And they're taking their tool that has allowed them to have the ability to garner that understanding, and they've gone out and actualized that chance that we all have whenever we put a transducer on our boat that gives us the ability to see underwater. As soon as you have that capability, the people that take the time to open their mind and just go out and experience on all sorts of fisheries, put the time in on the water, throw a million different baits, become a tackle junkie, and really start to play around with things throughout the different times of the year, throughout different fisheries across the country, and understand what bass actually do and not just what we think they do. They have that understanding built in that they've developed, and they have the understanding of the techniques and the approaches that we use to actually catching those fish. And they execute perfectly because they understand what that requires, on top of that, really good base understanding of bass behavior that they've gathered by getting to watch them every day. And so it only makes sense that guys are dominating their fields. I mean, we've seen it hold true with guys like Spencer and Becker and Jacob Wheeler and Connell and Alton Jr. and all those guys that have just gone out and walked on us for years, over the last few years. It's because they've taken the time to understand what bass actually do and understand the best way to go about catching them. And you have to be perfect to ever have a chance to beat them on the water.
Yeah, I love that, and I'd love to see and hear if you guys want to expand on this for a little bit. And Andy, feel free to hop in here. Is when you, Spencer, talk about learning what each species of fish is on forward facing, like there's an art to that, and there's a learning curve in that. How long do you think the learning curve was for you to get good at identifying what fish were before even throwing at them?
Ooh. Making me think.
Well, I mean, Drew and Spencer, feel free to hop in there too. Like, how long do you guys think it took you to really get a good feel? Like when you put scope down, you saw different species of fish, you could pick out that's a school of crappie, that's a drum, that's a carp, that's a bass.
I had an early privilege. I don't know if you want to call it a privilege, but I had an early privilege of fishing at the advent of live scope on prime, awful Kentucky lake. That's my home lake. And so I got a really good familiarity with understanding both trash fish and how to read bass's body posture to understand that they are not everything around them by being inundated in a place that's endless carp, drum, catfish, and gar, crappie, white bass, whatever trash fish you can imagine that's in most of our fisheries, it's in Kentucky Lake, and it's in there by the millions. And so to have that opportunity early on was really formative for me because it allowed me to understand very quickly that if I don't have a reason to throw at a fish or I don't have a reason to believe that it's a bass, I shouldn't be. And it made me very selective very fast because I was able to throw at some fish, watch how they move in the water, see them come up at times and see them with my eyes and understand what everything is in the environment and how it sets up, how it postures in the water column was a tremendous opportunity for me. So it took me probably a good year and a half to really master that ability to understand what body posturing means, what returns mean and things of that nature. And I do think it's a big thing. I started with Garmin. I'm still with Garmin. I'm not, that's my personal plug. I love LiveScope. It's been, the 34 is a fantastic product. But whatever brand you use, if you're going to get out there and you're going to commit the time to learning it, be very cautious about making an adjustment too hastily. Not saying there's not good adjustments to be made, but once you get familiar with your equipment, really dig deep and try to understand what you can do with it.
Yep. Spencer, what about you, man? Same question.
Yeah, I mean, on my lakes, I didn't have anybody. I mean, the first time I'd ever seen live scope was probably in 2018, fishing with my buddy Stetson Blaylock around here a lot. He had it. Back then it was just called Panoptics, I believe. But, man, I remember the first time I ever saw it, we were up on Lake Ouachita, and I knew instantly, like the very first fish we caught. And it was on, I mean, we were catching them on Demiki using it. But then we weren't, that was before we were actually casting to the fish and shaking it over them. Like we would pull up and get right over the top of them and drop down to them. And, looking back at it now, I'm like, gosh, we were such dummies back then, But just seeing them fish come up and eat it on that, but being able to see them way out in front of us and go up to them with the trolling motor and stuff, like I was like, dude, this is the deal. So I got it in 2019 was the first time I got it. In like September, October, I had the option of either fishing a Toyota series because I had just enough money to do one of the other, just enough money to go. I was like third or fourth in the points at the time, so I had a good shot to make Toyota Series championship. But I had just enough money to either go fish the Toyota Series tournament to try to qualify for Toyota Series championship, or take that money and buy a live scope. And I just felt like buying a live scope was the best option for the long haul. That Toyota Series deal was just immediate right then and there. The live scope was something I knew I could learn. Not many people were using it, something that could take me a lot further. Because I knew when I saw it, that was a major game changer as far as a tool to have on the water. And so I did. And man, I started learning it. I live here on Lake Hamilton, so I fish it probably 3 or 4 days a week. The other rest of the week I'm on Ouachita or Catherine or DeGray. But knowing where bass lived already, knowing where all the crappie were, all the bass and things like that, being able to pull up on places, and before I would fish them, get a good visual of what it looked like, what they looked like, already knowing what they were before I ever started casting to them, and then going from there, playing with it. also, you know, I got the Arkansas River here. It's about 40 miles from my house, going and live scoping around jetties and out and around in current and eddies and things like that, and getting a feel for what was bass versus trash fish and the way they would react to a bait or not react to a bait. Lots of stuff like that. I feel like if you live somewhere like, I'm not going to say the St. Lawrence River necessarily because it's got a lot of walleye, a lot of perch, a lot of drum. But if you lived on one of the Great Lakes, like just say Ontario, for instance, because it's a pretty clean lake. I mean, I've spent a lot of time out there, and it seems like pretty much 60, 70% of what you see, or when I'm there in July or August, is a smallmouth most of the time. I mean, it seems like it's always a smallmouth. So that would be a hard lake to really, an area like that. A lot of the places in like New York and stuff are so full and rich with bass that it would be really hard to get really, really good with it. A Toledo Bend or a Del Hollow, I think, would be kind of hard because they're so full of bass. Pretty much everything you see is a bass. I mean, obviously, there's tons of other fish. You got rainbow trout. You got, I mean, Del Hollow, I don't know how many trout I caught that I thought were smallmouth there in practice until I realized that was a trout. You know, after I caught like 10 of
100 times faster than a smallmouth after your bait.
Like, oh, yeah. After like the 10th one, I was like, okay, every time I saw it, I knew that was a trout from then on. But, you know, they were set up a lot like I was expecting the bass to be when I first got there. So being on, if you got a body of water, it's got a lot of trash fish, a pretty healthy population of bass. If you can learn to differentiate the word if you can figure out how to define what's a bass over a trash fish, then it will carry you a lot further, because when you go to other lakes, you can immediately start to decipher what's bass versus trash fish. So that was what really was big for me, was being able to have, I mean, we got quite a few trash fish in our lakes too, but I immediately started going to places that I already knew what was there, like bass and crappie, and getting a good visual of what they look like, how they were moving in the water, how they reacted to my bait, swam towards it when I threw at them, followed it to the bottom, the way they reacted to it. I learned by, you know, doing that. That's pretty much how I started learning. So, and I'm still learning, dude, 6 years later. And I swear to you, every time I go in the water, I'm learning something different. Every single time I'm learning more and more on the water with that live scope.
And that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways, I think, for people listening to this, even if you had it for a couple of years, is understand that the Spencer and Drew here talking about how long it's been taking them to for this learning curve. That's for how often, more often than an average person, you guys are on the water than 100%. Somebody that say works a 9 to 5. So one, I think this is a couple takeaways from this point. I think it's one, this takes a lot more patience than I think is realized, where a lot of people have this assumption, especially those who never used it before. You put it on your trolling motor and automatically you see every fish that exists in the lake, and it's easy. Mm-hmm. I can't say how many times I've talked to people that use it. They're out there in the middle of the lake chasing carp around and wondering why they're not biting and thinking they're bass. Where it's a big distraction for a while, and I think you have to go through that stage to understand it, like you're mentioning, Spencer.
For sure.
And then two, I think that add another level of legitimacy to the art aspect of an art and an understanding that comes with it, and that only, I think, comes with time. It's, I feel like you have to go through a phase of getting a little lost with it for things to click. Like, we have a comment here from Scott Bowers, and he says, "I just got scope on my boat late summer, and said, so far it's only hurt my averages. Hopefully I get more dial this winter." Where I feel like you go through a time period with this where it kind of seems confusing. I would say confusing, but you're trying to understand things, and then all of a sudden it starts to click and you start putting steps together. Would you guys agree on that front, or it's a repetition and time thing? You have to stick with it to get to that level of increasing your efficiency.
You have to stick with it. I mean, you have to. I was going to say, one other thing I wanted to add to what I was saying is it takes a lot of time, man. I've got 2 or 3 guys I fish with. I don't fish with many people, but I've got 2 or 3 guys I fish with. My dad, my neighbor, and a good buddy of mine, and they fish with me almost every day I'm on the water. One of those 3 goes with me, and we do I do a lot of scoping with them and let them throw at the fish, and it's extremely frustrating for me because they are wanting to throw at every single thing they see. And they've been going with me for like 3 years. They know what a 5-pounder looks like. They know what's about. but they still in their head, they can't seem to get it like, okay, I don't need to throw at that. For the last 2 years, we haven't thrown at a fish that's swimming that way or looks that way or that small, and they continue to keep wanting to throw at those type of fish, or they'll be reeling a bait or jerking their jerk bait, and a fish comes up to it. Instead of trying to start changing it or working it more radically or get it away from the fish, like a Demiki, for instance, they want to, once the fish starts coming up to it, it's almost like they start slowing to let that fish catch up to it, and every time they'll bail. And I'm like, what are you doing? Speed it up. Get it away from him. And it's like, it just won't click with them. It cannot click with them. So I know why a lot of guys hate it so bad. It's because they're not having success with it, because they haven't spent enough time to learn all of these little tips and tricks, like the speeding a bait up away from them. Not all the time does that work. Sometimes you do need to slow down, like with a jerk bait. Let the fish catch up to it. But most of the time, they want you to get that bait away from them. When you see them start coming to it, you need to start getting it away from them even quicker. Faster they come, the faster you go. That's the way you get them to bite 90% of the time. But people want, like, the fish to start coming to it, and then they'll start to slow down, and they start letting their bait, like they're trying to let the fish get right up to it, and that's never going to happen. I mean, I tell them every time, like, if you slow it down, reel it in. Just reel it in. And it's so hard to teach them that, even though you're there with them and you're showing it to them and telling them that, they still, I've learned that some people, it's really hard for them to grasp that. So I feel like where we're at, and the reason so many people are hating this thing, is because they can't grasp exactly how to use it, or they're not spending enough time to figure it out. So they just want it to be banned altogether. And that's the most frustrating part for me. When they go with me, they love it. They absolutely love it. They're obsessed with it. My dad, 68 years old. Dude, it is an absolute fight to do anything other than scope with him, because that's all he wants to do. He wants to stare at that screen, and he loves it. And I'm like, Dad, I want to go skip a jig under docks, flip grass, throw a chatterbait, something. I want to do something different, because I have to do this all the time. And, dude, they're obsessed with it. So I feel like we wouldn't even have this argument over scope if guys understood it better. If they truly understood it and realized what an art there was to it, there would be no argument. Everybody would be on board with it.
Yeah. Or is it more of they understand its power, right? But they don't have the patience to
figure it out.
Time to learn it and figure it out, and they give up on it after 8 hours.
And a major issue as well with it is that the learning process with any, a lot of really tough to learn concepts in educating yourself in anything. And especially, I think this really translates very well to the idea of learning a foreign language. Because when you're learning a foreign language, you have to learn word parts. And then as you learn these word parts and conjugation, how these words fit together, when you learn 400 parts to words, you make infinitely more words than you make just 400 parts, because all these parts fit together to form a new word. You learn a new part, that's not just one new word. That new part plugs in to 17 different parts you've already learned to make, 50, 60 new words. This one little detail could be the missing piece to why you don't understand this concept. And so, talk about like steps 1 through 400. You learn step 1, 2, 3, skip step 4 because you just, for some reason, don't grasp it or never end up in that situation. All these different situations: shallow grass fishing, dirty water; deep brush fishing, fishing clean water that's shallow; fishing floating docks; fishing wood docks in the cold versus fishing wood docks when it's warm. All these different pieces that you see and that you get to experience, all these little different details fit in a different pattern. And so as you learn this, you may have wood docks in dirty water in the cold, but in this situation you have hard bottom versus grass. And so that one little detail of what you don't understand about fishing hard bottom, or what you don't understand about fishing grass, plugs directly into that whole dock fishing scenario. It's not even about docks at that point, as in what you don't understand. What you don't understand is related to what you don't understand about learning hard bottom or grass, because that's part of the situation. And so you learn all these steps, and if you miss steps, you miss whole pieces, because this piece over here, step number 341, it requires steps 2, 4, 8, 17, and 112. And if you don't have step 112, but you have all these others, you'll never get to step 341 because you have a missing link. And so your brain doesn't process it because you have a missing link that's required for understanding why what happened. And it's exponential. As you learn one thing, as you go down the line, one thing is one thing when you start, but as you go down the line, if you're able to pick up one more thing every day you go out, one thing could mean the difference between, having a set number of things you've learned. You learn one more thing and it might plug directly into why I don't understand fishing laydowns when the water's really clean on a place down south. And if I learn, why fish down south act a certain way in clean water in the fall, that might apply to fishing laydowns in that clean water scenario. And so when I do that, I've learned that one little thing about clean water fishing in the fall, which applies to the laydowns, applies to docks, applies to fishing deep points, ditches, schooling fish. That one little detail that I may have learned about fishing clean water fish in the fall in the south might plug into all those scenarios because now I've understood a little piece that extrapolates across a whole bunch of different ideas. And so if you don't understand all those little details, you aren't going to understand the big picture things because you don't have all these little nuggets of clean water, dirty water, warm water, cold water, grass, hard bottom, sand, silt, north, Midwest, east, tidal, southern, Florida, Texas. You big fish, fishing 5 fish tournaments for a fishery that has smaller fish, fishing every fish counts tournaments with a higher average size. All these little nuggets, they compile this knowledge base that you build. And if you don't have all these little pieces, there's going to be concepts that just don't make sense to you.
Yep. That is so well said. And I want to hit on that here in a second and pose another question to you guys. But I quickly want to mention to the folks that are either tuning into this live or they're listening MP3 wise. I know the title originally said top 6 tips for forward facing. Well, you're just getting a lot more than that here. We're not organizing it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. So make sure you guys. Yes, they are dumping a lot. So make sure you guys are taking notes on this because this is really good stuff. So with that, I posed this off your point you just made, Drew. I posed this to you and Spencer. Is you see, I've seen it happen a lot recently, and it's people that are maybe they're not completely fresh and new to fishing, but maybe they've got into it in the past year or two, and they already want to get forward-facing sonar, but they don't know how to read a map. They don't know how to read side imaging. They don't understand certain basics of fishing. One, do you think that there needs to be steps to your process there, Drew, where they need to understand certain things before they get forward, or do you think it's okay to start out using forward-facing off the get-go?
I'm going to be perfectly honest, and this answer is going to be a little bit non-typical, but my getting of forward-facing sonar and a live scope coincided perfectly with I was a Midwestern angler that never fished outside of Illinois, Kentucky, and Indiana and Missouri my entire childhood. When I got the opportunity to make the step up to college, I decided it would be worth my mowing money and grocery store $7 an hour money to go out and get scope because it would allow me to break down these fisheries faster. Now, that being said, I had a rudimentary understanding of bass fishing. I had gone out and fished, different times a year on different fisheries, but they were all small, local fisheries or Kentucky Lake, Table Rock, a couple regional big fisheries, but I had a very base understanding. If you understand the fact that this is not going to automatically catch you more fish, this is not going to be something where you go out and throw at everything you see and let's just throw at every single fish in the water, because if I do that, some of them are going to be bass, and take these approaches to it. If we can go into it understanding that goal number 1 when you're using scope early on is learning. Goal number 1 is going out and getting to witness these things happen and trying to understand the environment, not just understand the bass. Understand why shad do what they do. Understand why catfish set up the way they do in the water, or walleye, crappie, whatever. Just go into it with the mindset of I'm just trying to learn things. I'm not trying to catch more fish immediately, because I think a lot of us, yes, that's why we do this. We want to catch fish, and that's why people make those decisions. But they jump into it thinking I'm going to jump in, and my first goal is point A to point B. Point A is where I am. Point B is catching as many fish as I possibly can, and thinking you can just make that step through the power of sheer will. And so if you're not going to go in with the mindset of this is going to take me a long time and I'm probably going to catch fewer fish for a period of time than I have prior, then you're probably not in a place mentally where you're ready to make that step up. And it's another thing where you got to understand that it's an efficiency tool and it's an effectiveness tool, meaning it's going to heighten your ability to cover water, and it's going to heighten your ability to actualize more opportunities when you get around bass. But if you don't have your equipment dialed, you don't understand a basic understanding of tackle, of knots, of why you use certain rods for certain situations, why you use certain reels for certain situations, understanding of line and what it makes baits do in the water. If you don't have that basic understanding, then you're using that efficiency and effectiveness just to get yourself to status quo. You're using that boost to try and get yourself to where you should be from just having a basic understanding of charts, of contours, of tackle and equipment. You're using that boost, essentially you're using it before you should. And then the problem is you get to that status quo, you start catching some fish and you're okay with that. And so you don't push for excellence in the other forms of how you get to, being great at bass fishing, because you make that jump, you start making that adjustment and maybe learning some things, but you make that jump a little bit before you have a, very solid basic understanding of tackle and equipment and how bass move and do what they do. And you're going to get to a mediocre point where you start catching some fish and you're going to be okay with it. And that's not an approach that I think is very safe. And I tell you what, we talk about misconceptions and all these things. Of one thing bass fishing understood before scope and has understand for a long time is how bass use contours to move. And I'll say this right now. If we couldn't use charts or mapping, there would be a much greater change in how many bass get caught than whether we can use scope 33.3% of the day or 100% of the day. Charts and mapping are the biggest part of why we do what we do on the water and how many fish we catch. And so if you don't, point blank, if you don't understand charts and mapping, you don't need to be using forward-facing sonar yet.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Spencer, anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, no, you got to understand charts. I mean, I look at mapping before I ever get to see where I think I need to spend my time and how the what kind of depths in the lake, how quick are these contours and how does the creek channel swing up against the points? I'm looking for all kinds of different places to start my practice. I mean, areas that look like they're going to set up right for what I want to do, whether it's scoping or fish shallow. So yeah, you have to understand mapping. I mean, you get live scope, but if you don't understand what you're even scoping, then you might as well just not even be out there. I mean, you have to have an idea of where to start. I mean, that's the most important part, no doubt.
And now I guess to quickly just expand and complete this thought is, do you think then on that learning curve for somebody that's newer to the sport, say they can understand what they're looking at from a topographical map, they see the lake, they understand what's a hump, what's a break line, what's sharper break, what's not, they understand the basics. Do you think it's okay then to get into forward facing, or do you think they need nowadays to have a knowledge of side imaging 2D, or do you think that's not as important anymore?
I don't think it's as important anymore. I mean, as long as you get scope and start to understand what you're looking at, being able to tell the difference between rock, grass, hard bottom, soft bottom, things like that. Because not every fish we're catching on forward facing sonar are we seeing them before we throw at them. I mean, a lot of times I'm catching them, I'm throwing at targets that I feel like a fish could be sitting on. A section of bottom that looks right. I can tell it's a little bit thicker rock than everywhere else around it. The grass, I can see a void in the grass, taller clump of grass, something like that of that nature. So there's a lot more to it than just going around looking at the fish. So, I mean, man, I can honestly tell you, I don't use side scan a whole lot anymore unless I'm straight up looking for stumps or brush piles. That is it. Or bluegill beds, or shell beds, something like that. I just don't spend as much time idling around anymore. I get in an area, I pretty much throw the trolling motor over and I start looking for those pieces of cover down those contour lines that I feel like the fish should be set up on and go from there.
I think it's a situation where I think it's a natural transition. Once you understand charts, contours, things of that nature, I think it's a natural transition to go from there to actually seeing what's going on underwater, because now you've established an understanding of what makes a point, what makes a flat, why do ditches matter? What does it look like on my unit? You know, what when these lines get really tight, what does that mean? When they get really wide and open, what does that mean? And understanding how to identify all these things and go, okay, this is a round flat. This is a flat spot that goes around what would be a really tight point, except for right here, it's round and a little bit more gradual taper all the way across. You now see that, you understand that on your map. And then when you pull up and you have that understanding of this is what this is, and this is why it matters, then I can start looking in the water and identify, oh man, this type of contour is holding a bass. Now I have the ability to go on my maps, look around, and repeat that by understanding the factors in the environment that are right around it. Meaning, does this round point have to have a creek channel that runs right by it? Does this round point have to be on the main lake versus in a creek? And so these understandings of mapping and what makes an area significant is really important for you to be able to repeat any success that you have on the water from your ability to see and take in that information. And if you don't have the ability to repeat it, it doesn't matter how good you are at looking around and taking in that info if you can't repeat putting yourself in an area to collect that information.
I love that. We got a couple questions coming in. One, really quick, we got to call out this comment from somebody watching over on Twitch. They said they love this show. It is the perfect evolution of beard growth. So from Drew to myself to Andy to Spencer, it's the perfect evolution. That was just
if only
good
we were in order, right? Like going clockwise, it'd been fantastic.
100%. And I see another comment here. Man, I'm about 4 years past that, and unfortunately, if I let it go, I just look vaguely dirty in the distance. I look like I fell over in my yard, and that's something I don't really shoot for. So that's why I keep it the way it is.
So you're almost reaching Bailey status to where, like, if he just
Dirt
trims
stash.
it, he has to stay away from schools. So
pretty much, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, something that makes other people concerned, and and makes little kids kind of rub their eyes to see if they've got, they just woke up from a nap and they think they have crusties in their eyes. No, it's just my poor attempt at facial hair.
My facial hair just makes people question my sanity, which it might be an accurate depiction, but either way, this or that, we could talk about this for a long time. But appreciate the comment that it earned some share because it was pretty funny. But we got one here from Scott Bowers, and he asked, the aspect ratio, length versus depth of your scope setting was a big deal for me to understand fish size and species. I'm interested to hear Spencer and Drew's thoughts on that. Whichever one of you guys want to go first.
Go ahead, Drew.
I'm a huge proponent of that. I'm a huge proponent of proportioning your screen appropriately as you move shallower, deeper, or as your needs change in terms of what you're looking for. So I 100% agree. If you don't keep your screen proportional, it's just like your TV. Back in the day when we'd put a CD in, we'd have to choose between full screen and widescreen. If you chose the wrong one, you're either not getting the whole picture or you're cramping it. And so you got to understand what your screen's capable of in terms of proportioning things to look right. And as soon as you get that, you got to understand that when you go out, you got to go down. When you go up, you got to come in. And if you don't do that, you're probably not going to keep the body movements right. There is a concept that, like, you can run it however you want it because it's always going to look the same in terms of the return, which is true. But the issue is it's not about necessarily seeing how hot the return is or even what the shape of the return is. I want to see how the return, which in this scenario is a fish, is moving in the water, and see exactly how its body's postured. And that's a huge, huge deal. So to leave your scope and just, run it down when you need to run it down, but never run it out, or run it way out and never run it down in conjunction, you're very much pulling and pushing the returns on your screen and making it very difficult to decipher what's going on, because you can't read posturing and you can't read body movements whenever you're just reading some sort of amorphous blob that you've created by smashing it or pulling it.
So, Drew, what would be your optimal range for somebody just getting adequated with live scope, right? So length from boat to distance you want to look out in front of you, and how deep would you set it? So to throw you out there, you're fishing 20 foot of water on a hard bottom with deep breaking contour lineup. What would your setting be for that?
So if you're starting in 20, and I would probably promote being somewhere in the 23 to 24 range down, and being somewhere in the high 70s out, mid-high 70s at that range. I mean, I'm a live scope user, so we have the ability to dial it really tight, which is one feature I love about it. And you know, but really my go-to like starting point for going up or down is going to be 18 down, 60 out. That's kind of my baseline for what looks really right, and I'll adjust from there, you know, in or out. But that's what's worked for me. That's what keeps my proportions looking right. What keeps a bass looking like a bass. What keeps catfish looking like a catfish. What keeps everything in the water looking the way it's supposed to. And those are the framings that I run.
I like that.
Dig it. Spencer, anything to add on that, man?
Well, I mean, it's what I would tell somebody. You know, I usually try to run my depth about 5 to 10 foot deeper than the fish I'm fishing for. If I'm out deeper than, say, 15 foot of water. Now, if I'm, say, everything I'm catching, I'm scoping up shallow around the bank in 2 to 6 foot of water, then I usually am never going to run my depth much deeper than about 15. And I usually run my forward range on anywhere from 80 to 90. But when I'm out deeper, you know, say 20 plus, or just say the fish I'm catching are in 20 to 30 foot of water, I'm usually going to run my depth range on 35 to 40, and my forward range, I would say they need to keep that within 90 to 100. You know, my depth range doesn't change. I would, you know, my depth range has stayed true from when I started. I try to keep everything the biggest I possibly can in my screen. So you see a lot of these guys, all the fish they're catching is in 20 foot of water, but they got their depth range on 50 foot, you know, and that just crams everything, you know, it compresses it. You're losing so much screen there. So if the fish I'm catching is in 20 foot of water, even if I'm sitting in 65, 70 foot of water, I'm only going to have, if the fish are consistently in 20 foot of water, 18 to 22, I'm going to keep my depth on about 27 to 30, max 30. I mean, max 30. But you know, me now knowing what I'm looking at and having a lot of time with it, I keep my forward range. If I'm deeper than 15 foot of water, my forward range stays on 120 all the time now. It's only if I get less than, you know, say 12 foot of water that I will ever start to bring my forward range in a little bit. And it rarely ever gets less than 95. It's usually always between 95 and 105. That's where I keep it on forward range.
I love that. And I think to add on a quick note of that, when you're talking about, I think if people especially been paying attention to the lives with you guys and bass the past couple of years, when you have those summer tournaments, especially, I think that's where it's heightened, and they're out, you know, roaming these deep trenches, whatever, in the abyss, as we call it. You'll see the guys on the screen where it's like, I don't see much. All I see is a black screen they're looking at, and there's random blobs on it. That's because of what you're exactly saying, whether that's thermocline or, like you said, they're consistently only 20 or less below. That's how they're adjusting their screen to look like that. That's a great call out.
Yep.
One more question for you guys, and then we'll get to each of your last tip if you got one. And that's from Clodial Cast here. He asked a little bit earlier on, but do you guys think the Nico has replaced the jig head minnow for largemouth? Spencer, we'll go to you first. What do you think?
Oh, that's a Drew question. He's a Nico master. I don't throw a Nico a lot unless they're up on the banks, you know, trying to spawn, and I'm just going around skipping it under docks or down seawalls. Honestly, I mean, I'll room with him, stay with him. I know he loves throwing a Nico rig. I mean, I love catching him on it, but that's not something I usually throw for him out very deep. I usually throw a drop shot or something like that, usually if they're down more towards the bottom, or little jig, something like that. But I don't know. For me, it hasn't really replaced anything yet as far as going around and throwing it for largemouth in particular.
Okay.
It's hard to beat a jig head minnow if the water's under 60 degrees for largemouth. It just is, man. It straight up catches them. I have noticed once the water gets over 60, 62-ish, it gets pretty hard to catch largemouth on a jig head minnow unless you go somewhere like, you know, there's certain lakes I go to where they just don't get any pressure. And heck, I think the water could be 115 and they would run straight to it and eat it. But if you go to a regular, I mean, in Texas, there's some places, you know, I'm only an hour from the state line. So there's some places in Texas I go that are just dumb, man. I mean, every bass that sees that thing, it don't matter if it's August or 1st of January. If she sees a jig head minnow, she's going straight to it and eating it every time. But for the most part, it's anywhere else in the country. It seems like they want it 60 degrees and below. So a Nico probably is better in our schedule and the places we go. A Nico probably is better than a jig head minnow. I would say over half the time, I would think you'd be better off throwing a Nico rig than you would a jig head minnow if you were strictly fishing for largemouth.
Okay. Drew?
The finesse worm is the ultimate. It's the scalpel of largemouth fishing. I mean, it does not matter where you go, what time of year you are. Yes, there's time of year that's better. Once you get in that warm water situation, that water breaks that equilibrium, generally going to be found. I mean, it's not a hard line, but the hard line's pretty much right around the spawn. When you're favoring pre-spawn, that minnow is really powerful, and it's something that's very, very dominant. Not meaning you can't catch them on the worm pre-spawn, because there's times that you can. But with that being said, that hard line is generally right around the spawn, and it goes until it gets cold. And it's two different situations in my mind most of the time. Rarely do I ever catch them on both really well at the same time, because generally the minnow is going to play more of a cold water role for me, and the Nico is going to play more of a warm water role. Again, not a hard and fast 100% of the time rule, but that's a 95% of the time rule, meaning only 1 in 20 times, maybe 1 in 15 times do I break that rule in terms of just how they act. Meaning this isn't just like, oh, I just like this one for this, I just like this one for that. I do math every day I go fishing the entire time, because no matter what you feel about certain things, I love the Nico, but no matter what you feel about certain things, the math is just the way to make the truth known amongst all your feelings of what you might want. And so keeping track of casts in front of fish, of bites, of landed fish, and all these different aspects of it allow me to make sure I make the right decision at all times on the water. And that Nico is generally going to be in a very different situation from the minnow. So I wouldn't say it replaces it in any sense whatsoever. That being said, we fish our tournaments from the end of January, beginning of February to August, meaning that most of our season falls in that warm water zone. So if we're going to pick one or the other to fish the entire tournament season with, I'm picking the Nico, just because of its versatility across a wide range of fisheries in that warm water time of the year. And when it comes to largemouth, overall, if there is no bait that's ever been better than a soft plastic worm, period. In terms of bite percentage across a large span of the year, across any region of the country, there has never been a bait that catches a largemouth better than a soft plastic worm. There's tons of amazing techniques that I throw on a regular basis that I throw primarily in front of a worm, whether it be a Nico, shaky head, drop shot, whatever it may be. There's a ton of techniques that I'll throw in front of it sometimes. But in terms of universally being consistent at, I can go make one bite on every single largemouth fishery in the country, there's no bait that's done that like a worm. And so a Nico is just one of the ultimate presentations of that worm, because a drop shot allows you to fish for fish very effectively near the bottom. Primarily is its sweet spot, near the bottom, but not on the bottom. Meaning when you have some issues with bottom composition, you have issues with visibility, or you have issues with cover, the drop shot is a great solution. Shaky head's an awesome option when you're fishing around hard bottom, when you want a bait to glide or slide a little bit, and putting it under pieces of cover, or allowing it to, essentially what you're doing with a shaky head with that glide and that swoop motion, even though it's a fixed depth of water, say it's 8 feet of water, it's not falling for 8 feet. It's falling for 11 and change as it does that, because it's not falling in a straight line. So it's taking that, you can use a heavier head and get a slower rate of fall. But when you move from that, the Nico can do what the shaky head does in terms of action. It can be fished on the bottom very effectively, just like it. But the main difference with the Nico is when you hang it on a tight line, it acts in the same manner as a wacky worm would. A little bit more aggressive, a little bit more mobile, because that weight keeps it swinging. So that bait's going to vibrate a little bit, it's going to shake a little bit, and when you snap it, it's very reactive. It's instead of that wacky worm going and kind of, Nico's going to go. It's more reactive, but it's the same concept. And when you hold it on a tight line, it'll act very similar to a wacky worm, which means you can accomplish fish that want to feed on the bottom, you can accomplish fish that want to feed up, and you can accomplish fish that are very hard to catch, because that bait, oftentimes is run with a lightweight, acts very well in light line. The major place that I think it's at a severe disadvantage is around heavy cover, because the Nico operates best on open hook. If you can't throw it on an open hook, I would definitely strongly advise you find something else to throw, because the issue with the Nico is no matter how you rig it, if you rig it weedless, you're going to miss fish. That worm's going to foul and you're going to miss fish. I mean, no matter what you do, there's going to be times where it coils up on that hook, because it's run best with a small hook that's not inhibiting the action. The reason you throw a Nico is for, extreme flexibility of motion, the ability to throw a lightweight worm very effectively and feeding down and up. But you don't want to throw in a scenario where you inhibit that action very much. So I would say the one significant Achilles heel to the Nico, and the reason why I threw the drop shot at the Chowan and at Lake Garcia this year in the team series, was because of the fact that the drop shot is very, very powerful around cover, and it's much more efficient than the Nico. But that being said, long story short, the Nico is extremely powerful technique, but in no way do I think it's replacing the minnow. I think it's two different scenarios most of the time.
Damn. Just went dialed on the Nico. I love it. Well, that's one thing too. You called out that, I don't know, for anybody that hasn't thrown a Nico before either, it's interesting when you lift up on that. It's almost like a micro feel of like a blade bait when you can feel it kind of. It's interesting. There's something to that. It's a little sneaky sneak from Drew. I like that. All right. Do you guys? It's okay if not too, because you guys have literally dumped a lot of knowledge on the folks tonight. But if there was a last tip you guys could give each to the folks, do you guys still have anything left in the box to help folks with forward? Spencer, Drew, who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, I mean, I could talk this topic for hours. I mean, I've got a plethora of them that I'd love to converse about. But the one big one that I want to leave people with, we've talked approach, we've talked concepts, we've talked actual fishing application. The big one that I see a lot of people screw up with is they do the good old fashioned, my golf game's not going well, so I'm going to walk up to the tee box, set my tee down, I'm going to put the ball on it, I'm going to step up and swing. First thing I do is just step up and swing. They do that with scope and seeing fish all the time, meaning they don't set up the situation. They don't worry about executing the cast, the bite, and the catch. And so they don't take the time to step back with the caddy, talk about the shot, talk about how it sets up, different options for different clubs, different options for the wind, the lie. And so they don't take the time to assess all the variables in the situation. And so here's what happens. It takes them 20 minutes to create a scenario where they get around another keeper bass. It takes them 20 minutes to generate that opportunity. So it takes them 21 minutes to generate that opportunity, make the cast, and attempt to catch the fish. Right? It takes them 21 minutes. And in this scenario of from start of, the last time I caught a bass to hopefully landing this one, in that span of time, I've got that window, right? So it takes me an average of 20 minutes to generate a bite on this given day. Which means that if I botch that opportunity, now it's taking me 40 minutes to get my next bite from the previous one that I landed. Or I can take an extra 30 to 45 seconds to understand how that fish is moving, how it's positioned, understand what cover it is or isn't around, and try and pick the right club for this scenario, the right rod and technique, set up the right cast for it, meaning if I have to move the boat to adjust for wind or sun, I will. I'll adjust that boat positioning to make sure I make that perfect cast. And if it's really heavy cover, I'm going to find that angle that allows me to make that cast, put it in front of that fish effectively, and get it out most of the time, highest percentage amount of time. And so it might take me an extra 30 seconds, 45 seconds, minute. But now it's taking me 22 minutes to actualize that next opportunity from last catch to this catch, instead of botching it and it taking me 40 minutes to go from the last catch to now my next opportunity, which if I botch it again, guess what? Now I'm on 60-something minutes. Now I'm on 80-something minutes. And if I take the time to make sure I execute, even if it takes 45 seconds or a minute to set up that shot, I'm going to. Because when I have that opportunity, I'm not gonna throw it away by being hasty. So often people see one, they make the cast, the moment they see it, they don't take the time to line up, they don't take the time to make the right approach, and they cost themselves a lot of opportunities because of it. So what I'd say, take the time, take that 30, 45 seconds, set up the shot. Nobody walks up and just whacks the golf ball on the PGA Tour. Fishing is no different.
So some other examples are make sure your bait is like say you're using a jig head minnow, make sure your minnow's not all diagonal and such on your bait. Have it rigged the way you want it. Would you say too is, Spencer's talking about how he runs it out to 120. You see that fish at 110, maybe try to get to 80 to make a little bit more of an easier cast to that fish versus trying to really stretch it out and also making a short cast, which could potentially just spook that fish versus.
I can't speak for him. I think that's where me and Spencer may differ a little bit. My approach is set up the perfect cast. If you have to bring that fish in, bring him in. Unless they're incredibly spooky, bring him in. I'll say this for my Bass Pro Tour season. Probably 80% of all the fish I weighed this season were within 30 feet of the boat when I got them to bite. Dang. Including smallmouth on the St. Lawrence River. Your boat pressure matters, but it doesn't matter as much as you think it does. What matters a lot of times is the trolling motor. If you can keep that trolling motor noise away and keep from being super aggressive with your movements with the boat, the boat's presence itself is not as spooky as you think it is. Set up the perfect cast. Make sure you can present that bait in the way that you want to the first time, because the first cast is 95% of your bites, maybe 98% of your bites. Making a follow-up cast is not going to lead to as many bites as a perfect first cast. So for me, I'm a get it to 60-foot guy. I wanted it around that range if I'm going to hit it accurately, because that beam, it's however many degrees that it is, might be a foot wide at, 15 feet, but at 80 feet from the boat, it's the size of a school bus. You're not going to be able to hit that fish effectively 100% of the time at that distance. It's just not possible, which means I'm going to pull it into that percentage where I'm going to hit it right. At least I'm going to hit 19 out of 20 right the first time. Wherever that distance is for me, it might be different for everybody, depending on your equipment, depending on your home body of water. But bring that distance where it's just right for you to hit 19 out of 20 on that first attempt and fish for them at that distance all the time.
I like that. Spencer?
Yeah, a lot of it goes into water clarity for me. Like he said, a lot of the fish I catch, unless I'm throwing a minnow at them, and they're just aimlessly swimming or following bait, most of the time, every fish I catch is inside. They're within that 40 to 80 foot range. I run it out so far so I can see that fish from a long distance and get a feel for which way it's swimming, how fast it's swimming. Is he coming to me, going away from me, left, right? There's so many different variables, and people just, like I said, I take guys, they've been going with me for 3 years, and they think if the fish is going left on the screen, that means it's swimming left. If it's going right, it's swimming right. And I'm like, no, that's a way or two. You have to turn the trolling motor left or right to see where you're getting the brighter return as that fish is moving to know if it's going left or right. And so I try to get a good feel for that fish, if he's swimming left or he's swimming right, before I get within 100 feet of him. And then I can start to set myself up to make the perfect cast. When we were at Del Hollow this year, the water was pretty clear. Those fish, the cone angle is a lot bigger and wider out there at 100 plus feet, but those fish could see that bait 15, 20 feet from them. So, I was bombing it to a lot of them fish. I was weighing in there. I was catching 110, 115 feet from the boat on an extremely long cast with a 3/8 ounce queen stacker jig head and a jerk shad on the back of it or on it. And but I could get away with it there because of the fact the water was so clear. The fish were all following bait. They were hunting. You could you could literally see most of the fish I was catching. You would watch them perk up when the bait splashed the water out there. They were already instantly on guard, waiting to see what it was they just heard. And you could instantly tell as soon as they seen your minnow, there they go. Right to it. So you could bomb cast to those fish and catch them. But a lot of places like up St. Lawrence, I was catching them on, catching tons of them on a jerk bait, catching a lot of them on a little sniper jig and stuff. You would have to get your boat into position, especially since there was current involved. I can't tell you how many times I'd pull up on a shoal and see 4 or 5 big smallmouth hovering behind a boulder where the current was ripping over the top of it, and they're sit perfect right on the backside of this boulder or the backside of this shoal. And I would have to move around and get my boat set up and get it lined up and get it perfect with the current so I could bomb a cast out there to them and get that jerkbait down at the desired depth to pull them fish up out of 15 to 20 foot of water on the jerkbait I was throwing. And I knew that I was going to have to land my jerkbait out there at 120, 130 foot and have the fish within 40 to 60 foot of the boat to have that jerkbait get within striking distance of, like, so say those fish, you know, they were 20 foot deep. I knew if I threw my jerkbait out there at 130 foot, by the time I got it to where I was in that 60 foot range, that's when my jerkbait would actually be deep enough that I could pull those fish up to get them to bite the jerkbait. It wasn't like I was seeing them out there at 110 and bombing a jerkbait out there at 130 and just hoping they would come up, you know, 15, 18 foot to get it. So I would set my boat up right, and you would have to position it, get the fish in the right distance from the boat, make the perfect distance cast to be able to get the jerkbait down at the deepest point to be able to actually get those fish to pull up and come get it. So, no, I mean, I do a lot of different things like that. I mean, there's so many different variables with it to learn. Just time on the water. I mean, I'll tell anybody, I mean, if you're thinking about getting live scope, you want to learn it, you want to get better with it. The only way you can do it is not only listen to guys like on these podcasts that have a lot of success with it, but you can watch some YouTube stuff. Of course, you know, a lot of stuff you can watch on YouTube is here or there. Some of it's great. Some of it's very misinformation, you know, kind of stuff. Maybe not a lot of truth to it, but it's to just get out there and try to learn what you're seeing and be able to duplicate that. I mean, you definitely don't want to rush it. I mean, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see with guys that go with me is as soon as they see that fishing screen, they want to try and cast to it. And they're either, for one, they can't cast that far to begin with, or they're instantly going to be putting that fish on guard, but not presenting the bait to them properly. So it's a blown cast. Like Drew said, it's botched right off the bat. And I mean, I'll tell them, you might as well reel it in. We're going to have to find another one now because there's no way that fish is going to bite because you rushed it. You got to let me get the boat in position. Let's get set up on him, and then you can make the cast to him, and that's when you have your highest percentage to catch him. So there's a lot of little details to it, and you know, it's easy to tell somebody, but the only way you can truly learn it is to get out there and just really practice it yourself. I mean, I'm sure you guys, y'all are really good with scope too, I'm sure, and using 4-face sonar or whatever. You're good with it. And
we're in that misinformation YouTube group, Spencer.
You spend a lot of time out there on the water to
I know the difference between
that.
a sheephead, a walleye, and a smallmouth based on the way they
and
the way they look. So we're good. we're about that threshold. We're okay.
Yep. Yeah, they look a lot alike sometimes though, especially when they get down there 40 foot deep.
Oh yeah,
on bottom, hugging the bottom.
It is cool though to go full circle when we're talking about, you know, one of the first points of learning what these fish look like on your forward facing, just distinguishing between species. And it can almost become two where it's obviously one between the shape and such, but you also can almost, to your point earlier, Spencer, of distinguishing between behavior of the fish, where if they're similar size and shape, but learning how to behave. Like there was a time 2 years ago, state championship, and I was on some rogue smallmouth in the summer, but there was also a bunch of rogue channel cats that were actually swimming with smallmouth that would come up and eat jighead minnow. And the best way to distinguish, I mean, you could definitely tell if, you know, pending the size of that catfish, that it was a catfish. Obviously, you can see in the tail there's a difference, but also when they come up to bite, they do like a full figure 8 up under your bait before they come up to eat it. So if you see one start doing that, it's like you can see these little key factors in it, and it's really cool. Like, just to see all the different stuff that you can learn from this beyond just actually catching the fish. And I hope that's what people take away from this thing is this show hopefully helping them get some key pointers to get more dialed with it, just to learn more even about the fish species, than also just being able to have more fun catching fish. But it's awesome. You guys dropped a lot of freaking juice on them.
And not every fish is catchable. I mean, I feel like a lot of people feel like when they see them that fish should be catchable, and they're just not. I mean, you have to know when to just quit. I mean, I give them, if I feel like the fish hasn't seen my bait, then I might give that fish an extra cast or two. But once I realize that fish has seen my bait and made a decision himself or herself, whatever, not to bite, if I don't feel the need to either swap baits or present that bait to him differently, the same bait I'd already threw at him once, I am immediately scanning off that fish and going to the next one, because the more I can put it in front of, the more chances I'm going to have it put it in front of one that's going to eat it immediately when he sees it, or one that I can work just a little bit on a single cast and getting him to end up biting. I just, a lot of people I've seen, they just want to continue to follow the same fish. And I'm just, from my experience, rarely ever are you ever going to catch a fish that you've made more than 2 casts at. If you haven't caught him by the second cast, you might as well go on to the next one, because it is very rare to catch one that didn't bite within the very first cast or 2. I feel like your first cast is your best shot. Second cast, your chances go down. And after the second cast, it's almost not even existent. I mean, I don't know how Drew feels about that, but for me, I mean, after I've made one cast, honestly, because I know I've made the right cast, I've spent so much time doing it. I know I'm drilling them. When I make a cast, I'm making a cast with right in his wheelhouse almost every time. So if I can't get that fish to bite on the first cast, I'm going on to the next one almost immediately, unless I feel like the water's a little dirtier, or it's really cold and he was just a little slow getting to it. But I saw some aggressiveness to him towards the end, but my bait was too far away from him. Then I'll maybe reel it in and get another one back in on him really quick. But other than that, if he don't bite the first cast, I'm moving on. But I got a 2 cast rule pretty much. That's what I tell people. Give them 2 casts and go to the next one.
And that's a cool aspect when we talk about the flip side of and learning the true behaviors of these fish that we likely without this tech would not have known. Where there's a great instance was Cooper Gallant breaks one off on a jerkbait at fork and then caught that fish. I think it was like an hour or 2 later with the jerkbait still in its mouth. On the even extreme case was, honestly, it was Alex Weatherell at Toledo who lost a 8-pounder and then like chased it for like 5-10 minutes and caught it again. Well, yeah, there's instances where you have the flip side where they are pretty dumb, or they can turn
every now and then. It happens like that. Yeah, for sure.
Majority of what you're saying though, you're 98% of it. I feel like though, to your point, they're not catchable.
That's a pretty valid point, though, in that's a really good illustration, because how many times I cast at one is not based on a rule of thumb. It's based on how important is that fish to me. Is it an 8-pounder?
That's a good point, too.
5-fish tournament, I'm going to lock in on trying to catch that fish, because even if it takes me 20 minutes, an 8-pounder is an 8-pounder.
Yeah.
Versus if I'm on a Dale Hollow where I'm around 1 million bass, if I even make a cast where I think one acknowledged it but didn't show a ton of interest, and I missed him by 10 feet, if I know he saw my bait or at least knew it was there, I'm not going to throw at him again, because there's so many fish. I only want fresh opportunities all day long. But if I'm at Eufaula, Oklahoma, and I see a bass for the first time in half an hour, I'm locking in. I'm putting the poles down. And I'm picking him apart. And it's just based on the level of importance of that bite to me. That's what determines it for me. On the fishery that I'm on, is there an abundance of opportunity? If there is, then I'm probably going to keep rolling. Or, is there an abundance of fish of this class, whatever class fish it is? Then I'm going to keep rolling if I have a bad interaction. But if there's not an abundance of the class of fish that I just threw at, or getting this bite is really important to my tournament, whether it's 5 fish or every fish on a bad fishery, if this bite's really important to me, I'm going to lock in. If I feel like my odds of generating another opportunity of this caliber are likely, I'm going to keep rolling.
Especially if he's on a piece of cover, it seems like you have a good opportunity to sit there and pick them and get on the bite. I've done that.
100%.
A fish that's on a stump, a fish. I think it's more of a territorial thing. I mean, I have done that 100 times, where you find a fish, especially if they're in less than 10 foot of water, that's sitting on a piece of cover or on a dock post. You can mess with that fish enough sometimes to potentially get him to bite. But as far as open water fish that are just constantly swimming, it seems pretty hard to get them to bite if they don't bite within the first cast or two after that.
Love that. And without this tech, you're not even going to know that aspect. Like
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I love it.
And even on fish on brush piles and stumps, how many times before we had scope would we pull up and you knew it with a crankbait or anything, you pulled up, once you hit that stump 2 casts in a row, if you didn't get a bite, pull the trolling up and you went to the next stump. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's the way we fished it. Now you can pull up there, you see that stump, you see there's a 4 to 6 pounder sitting there, and you'll throw a crankbait. If you don't bite, you pick up a swim bait. If you don't bite that, then a Nico, a jig, drop shot, whatever, until you feel like you can potentially get that fish to bite.
Because I mean, those situations happen all the time, and like, you know, today one of those situations that makes any fish act like a target fish is very cold water. You know, very cold water, oftentimes I'm talking sub 42. Very cold water will make fish that even aren't on a target act like a target fish, meaning they're going to move slow enough and be zone related enough to where they're sitting that they're going to be fish that you can reapproach with a bait even after you've thrown at them, because they're probably not going to, you know, void that area. There's a reason they're living where they're living, because that water's freakishly cold and they're in calorie, you know, non-consumption mode. Yeah. So today I had one this morning. I was fishing with one of my buddies, and we had one in 6 feet of water, 38-degree water, that was sitting there, and I saw its body posture, I saw the shape of the fish, and I saw how he's related to the bottom, and I was like, there's no way that's not a bass. This fishery has a lot of carp in it, but I was like, there's no way that's not a bass. We made a few casts at it, and you could see it turn every time you got near it. This is off-colored water that's 38 degrees, and so you could see it turn a little bit to the bait, but like it wasn't acting quite right. You know, it's acting a little bit abnormal. But due to the body posturing and the shape of the fish and how it's set up related to the bottom, I knew that was a bass, and I knew it was one that was far above average. So we knew it was a bite that would mean a lot to get today. You're fun fishing, but it still means a lot. So we locked in, made 6 or 7 casts to make the right approach, and finally made that cast right in front of that fish's zone. You know, every fish has a little bubble that it operates in, and got that cast right where it needed to be, and it was a 7-1. In 38-degree water, 1 foot visibility, and although it acted very odd and very strange, I knew that bite was one that had value, and so we kept reapproaching it from a couple different angles, trying to find that zone where that bass was operating, because he gave me the opportunity to make multiple approaches, and I caught a 7-pounder because of it.
It's awesome.
Well,
what'd you catch him on, Drew?
I was just gonna say, you gotta tell us now.
What'd you catch him on?
On a Pearl 120 scope stick. I like a really big jerkbait in the winter when it's dirty water and cold. When it's really dirty and cold, I like a big jerkbait, and I like one in Pearl, and that one's an awesome option. And it's the one we had tied on, and that's the one she ate. We actually went out and caught a pretty big bag today. Had almost 28 pounds in about 5 hours. It was an incredible day. You know, bitter cold water is not fun for, you know, getting them to come at it from a distance. It's not fun for getting numbers of bites. But if you want to go out and try and catch your biggest bag on whatever fishery you're on, or your biggest bag of the year, you got to do it when it's really cold.
Dang. So it was a size day, not a numbers day, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Yep. We only had 7 bites over 4. Our biggest 5 were a 7-pounder, a 6.2, 5 1/4, and then 2 4 3/4.
That doesn't sound
fun day.
Yeah. It was a really good time.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Well, boys, I know we could definitely have a part 2, part 3, part 10 of this show.
Part 112.
Yeah.
But you got to watch. Hey, you got to watch shows 7, 10, 14, and 46 for it to make sense. You know,
that's right. Yeah.
No missing
for people
links.
that paid attention throughout the show. That's right. You better. If you didn't understand what he meant by that, you got to go back and listen to this thing all over again because you missed it. But yeah, that's awesome, and I think we definitely could circle back here in a couple months if we wanted to and do part 2. I think we should. But one thing I want to get with you guys before we log off here is the format for this year for the BPT, and being able to only choose one period to use forward-facing sonar. I'm not asking you to give away any juice strategy or anything like that, but I'm kind of curious your guys' thoughts on it and what I guess your mindset going into 2025 with only being able to utilize this technology for one period of your day. I guess, Spencer, kick it to you first.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of exciting because, like I started off saying at the very beginning of the show, I mean, there's still a lot of old school fishermen in me. I mean, when I'm here around the house, like it's been so fun the last 3 weeks because I'm absolutely drilling them skipping jig on our docks and going down fishing grass with the chatterbait stuff. Right now, all these fish are pulled up and you can just literally go around the banks and kill them. I mean, our water here is right now is 55 degrees where I'm at, so they're just everywhere. Got their feed bags on. I mean, there's still fish schooling even, so you can still catch them on top waters and things. And it's just having a lot of fun. But I like fishing that way, man. I like picking up a casting rod and pitching a jig and throwing a jackhammer and things like that. Frog. I mean, I miss getting to do that a lot. I did get to do it a lot in the five fish events when I was fishing the pro circuit, but in every fish counts, scope is by far the deal. I mean, it is, unless you're on a river system where they're all going to be, a foot of water and you're just not going to be able to scope. And I'm sure, somebody still figure out a way to catch them scoping. So only being able to have it one period this year. I mean, personally, myself, I wish that they would allow it like it's been all 3 periods or just take it away altogether. I mean, that's me preferably. I mean, there's going to be so much more strategy goes into it now. What period are we going to use it first, second, or third? But the good thing about it is there will be no more of that fight for me going back and forth. Do I need to be scoped like on a body of water like Santee Cooper or Eufaula or Chowan? None of that fighting back and forth internally for me. Should I be scoping or should I be up on the bank covering the water? Because once I use it and I call that one period, there is no going back. So I know I can get straight up and just take off power fishing or go back old schooling and pulling up on waypoints and just blind casting towards brush piles or isolated targets or heck, maybe even dropping the old blaze orange buoy marker out by stuff, like I used to back in the day. So I don't know. I'm excited about it. I really am. It's going to be interesting to see. I still don't think a whole lot's going to change at the end of the year as far as points, goes. I think that you'll see a couple guys, maybe like an Andy Morgan, kind of jump back up. You really see him kind of get back up towards the top of the point deal, just because he'll be able to really do some damage with a flipping stick this year, considering the fact that there'll be, a lot of us scopers won't be able to get out there and really put numbers up on the board other than for 2.5 hours in a day. But guys like Michael Neal, he's going to jack them no matter what. He's one of them guys. It doesn't matter if you're scoping. It doesn't matter if you're flipping. He's just going to catch them. Justin Lucas is going to do really, really well this year. I 100% would put Lucas and Michael Neal top 5 in points this year for a fact, just because of the fact they're good with the new technology, but they still compete at a very high level just fishing. So it's really going to benefit those a couple guys like that. But I'm excited about it because I think it'll kind of get to pull me out of some of the mindset I've been in, because I still feel like I'm really strong at just fishing, but I feel like I'm really good at scope too. So it's a constant battle for me if I know it's not going to be one of them days where I can scope from start to finish and not ever have to look back. So yeah, it's going to be a learning curve this year. I think, some of us are going to do better than expected. Some of us are going to do worse than expected.
Love that. Drew, what do you think?
For me, man, let's just get down to the nitty gritty of it. We as anglers, we benefit from our opportunity to get to go fishing a whole lot because we are entertainers. We are here to entertain people and show them how to catch more fish. And so if we can accomplish both goals in the same day, meaning go out and show people how to catch fish, teach them how to learn a new way, something they've never tried before, a different approach, and get to showcase how good we are at being perfect, how good we are at paying attention to little details and maximizing, oh my gosh, I go out on this fishery all the time and fish this place, and I can't ever catch him. And he went there and he just caught 40 pounds in less than an hour. He went out there and absolutely train wrecked him because he's going out there, he's making perfect approaches, perfect execution decisions, fantastic technique decisions. He went out and found all these fish in practice, and he's garnered this ability over time to be perfect. And we get to showcase that, and we get to showcase some techniques that haven't been seen over the last few years. In every single day of tournament competition all year long, people are going to get two very different views of bass fishing on that fishery. And, it's something where obviously me as an angler, as just purely as an angler, I have my own feelings on what I want or what I would have preferred. But that being said, we are entertainers. We produce a product for people to get to sit back at home on the weekend and indulge and get to, go, man, I wish I was on that fishery right now. I wish I was getting to do that. Oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Wow, look how cool that area looks. I'd love to get to fish that. Look at that grass. I mean, we don't have mats like that around here. Maybe someday we should go fish somewhere like that. That would be super cool. And so to get to showcase all of these different things guaranteed in every tournament day all year, I think is something that I think MLF got that decision pretty right when they did it, meaning if they were going to change something, being able to have it for sure in every tournament day and have periods of the day without it in every tournament day and be able to showcase it the entire tournament, all season long, being able to have diversity for sure in every day in terms of what people can see through the camera lens is something that I think will only be a positive. That being said, I've taken a lot of time to garner the ability to pay attention to details and make really specific decisions based on just what bass are doing, how they relate in their environment, how those changes happen over time. And so it's a little bit of a situation where I'm definitely getting nerfed a little bit in terms of that capability and that skill that I've worked to garner. But that being said, if this was not true, we wouldn't have even had the conversation in the first place. Tournaments will be won and lost in terms of making it to the end of the event consistently, event after event, all season long. Tournaments are going to get won and lost based on how good you are at understanding the fishery, meaning how hard you practice and how much you take in practice, and that third of the day that you have to truly take your best stuff and make it impeccable is going to be the determining factor in who wins AOI and who wins most events. So that's still going to be a very major part of it, but we're going to have an awesome factor of being able to showcase that perfection, that attention to detail, and so many awesome, cool techniques and so many awesome anglers, because there will be a lot of diversity in who does well throughout the year. The field's going to get to showcase themselves really well. The fisheries are going to get to be approached in two different manners for sure in every single tournament. And so it's going to be a situation where I think, in light of this decision and how it's set up, I think MLF did a really good job of finding a good compromise in a situation that works well for a whole lot of people. And I think it's going to be very entertaining to see how it all goes down, because, it's for some of us, it's a definite change in approach and strategy from what we've done the last couple of years. And for others, it's like hitting the time machine button and going back and fishing in the manner that they did 5 or 6 years ago before this technology existed, but on the fisheries that we have now, not 5 or 6 years ago's fisheries. And so, this is going to be a very, very interesting curveball for the entire field. And it's going to be something that I think will be really entertaining to keep up with. And I couldn't be more excited to get out of Conroe. As a bass angler, new challenge in format, new challenge in approach is something that always, regardless of whether you really want it or not, it's something that's always exciting. Like, it's the idea of like, thinking about, man, if I was to have boat trouble on this fishery, how would I go about navigating it and figuring it out and trying to salvage a good tournament? All these wrenches in the works that we may not necessarily choose are situations for us to kind of overcome it, to take on the challenge and to try and find a new way to do what we do. And so format changes are a way to do that. And, I'm very excited to get started with the new year.
Drew, it's not going to happen because obviously the seasons you've been having, you're too damn good of an angler for this ever to happen. But for whatever reason, if fishing never works out for you, commentating definitely is in the line of works for you. Because, dude, I feel like I just listened to a full breakdown of College Game Day right now from a fishing standpoint. So very bravo on that. But yeah, guys, this has been perfect. Perfect for people that have been needing some direction, needing some insider tips of how to really help them break down forward facing of, I know what's on the screen, but I don't really know how to use it effectively to help me try to catch more fish or to really understand fish better. I think this is a lot of information to download, and this hopefully will help folks do that. And if it is, please obviously let us know. Feel free to DM Spencer and Drew as well on their social media. I have linked down below as well that you've heard it from the show. Thank them as well for the time coming on here and dropping all that information on us. And make sure you guys are following them if you're not already. But gents, for real, this has been awesome. thank you so much for all the information, and we're looking forward to getting you guys back on. Spencer, not another 2 years. We'll make sure it's much more, it's much sooner than that. Likewise to you as well, Drew, and we'll be looking forward to rooting you guys on here in a couple months because, hey, season's what, like not even 2 months away for you guys?
Yep, dude, it's a little over a month and a half until we leave for Conroe.
Gosh, dang, that's
Coming
exciting,
quick.
boys. Yeah, there really is the off season, the quote unquote off season for fishing really seems to get shorter and shorter and shorter.
It does, man. It does.
Yep.
Well, gents,
No.
appreciate the time. Anything else that people need to know before we have you guys log off here? Cool.
No.
All right.
All good, man.
Well, appreciate it, boys, and we'll be talking to you guys real soon.
Thank you, guys. See
All
y'all.
right, we'll see you. I mean, come on, dude, you got to picture that, Drew. I mean, if there was a fishing college game day, Drew would be headlining that.
Oh, that'd be
He's such a good speaker, man. Such a good speaker. Michael Bradley asked if he ever has spoken at Bass. I believe he has a couple times, actually. Don't directly quote me on that, but I believe so. But seriously, big thanks to Drew and Spencer for coming on the show and dropping all that knowledge on us. Like we said from the start, they are hammers in their own right without the technology. We actually got through that, and the count was 34 for our swear jar. No, it's not bad.
Could be. I was expecting to be like 134, but they were very good at refraining from using the word forward facing sonar, right? Like,
no, we got to figure something out because I'd like to be able to put more in the pot for the end of the month to send to charity for folks that know what we're talking about with the quote unquote swear jar. Anytime we talk about and say live scope, forward facing, or something like that, there's another 2. That's 36. We put $1 in the jar, and
did that on
at the end of the month. Yeah. At the end of the month, then we throw it to charity. So we're making some good out of it. And so we only had one person that made a negative comment on the show too. It was pretty good.
Yeah, that's gonna happen, unfortunately. Still, it's kind of nice. So it's kind of quiet.
It's gone and passed. Yeah, because of all the changes and things like that with the trails. That's really been kind of the reason why, that you haven't heard about it lately, which, I mean, that'll start back up. I'm sure people start that.
As soon as the first event goes down and they're at Conroe and Jacob Wheeler catches like 65 pounds in 3 hours and the world's going to melt down again.
Yeah. Well, either way, all I will say to that, because I do not want to hone on that because I hate honing in on anything negative, is if you choose to see negative, you'll see negative. So try to choose positivity. Amen. Because there ain't no energy. There are energy givers and energy takers, and anybody that's sitting there whining and complaining is an energy taker. So don't be friends with energy takers. That's all I got to say. And the 2 guests we had are energy givers. They brought a lot of that tonight and appreciate them doing so. Hopefully you guys took a lot of notes from that. There's a lot to download, like we mentioned, and hopefully you guys took some of those tips and implemented that into your game. If it does, if you go out, use it, catch some fish, let us know. Send an email, slide in the DMs. Again, like I said, DM Drew and Spencer too. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear that some of that info helped you guys catch more fish, because that is the goal of Serious Angler here. And appreciate them taking the time up to be on Serious Angler. So that's right.
Great episode.
Amazing episode. And the last thing I got to say, and this is for people that have stayed through on the MP3 and are still watching right now on the live stream. But I will say, if you're not Omnia Pro member, you probably shouldn't listen to this because you might get a little salty. But if you're an Omnia Pro member, stick around because if you go to Omni Fishing's website, there's a little secret for you guys. A little secret. If you scroll all the way to the bottom on the homepage, there's a little tab called Pro Pricing. If you go to that Pro Pricing page, you will see these special deals that you get as an Omnia Pro member that average consumers do not get. Now, average consumers can still use our discount code, things like that. But when you're a pro member, not only do you get the 10% rewards back to your account, you also can still use discount codes on top of that to save, say, 10%. But then you also get access to Omnia Pro discounts and sales that the average consumer does not get. And I'm talking like heavy discounts on Daiwa reels, Shimano stuff, Like Andy, I'm sure you're browsing that right now because I know you're a tackle nerd and you're browsing that as we speak. So are you actually on it? Did I call that right?
You're 100% correct.
All right, rattle off some of these deals that I'm talking about right here.
All right,
Some
so
of the things that stand out to you.
the first thing is if you're a huge fan of the Tatula SV casting reel, the previous generation, they have some in there in the pro members only sale. That is a great price. So it's almost $100 off. So a $210 reel for $139. You got some Megabass Arachi rods in there, which are like 30% off. Yeah. That's just right at the beginning of it. Let's see here. Scroll down a little bit. You can get a Xenon X casting reel for $100 off. You can get
I mean, you got fish finders in here. You got literally you have $400 off of, we're talking about forward facing sonar tonight. There's another $1. Live Scope XR is $400 off in this as well. So that's $38 in the swear jar now.
Just stack them up, buddy.
Stack them up, baby. Yeah, Plano stuff in here. I don't even know if we're supposed to be showing you guys this page. Iowa Coastals that are $60, $70 off.
Veritas PLX rods, $50 off. So
the list just goes on.
$100. Yeah, you can get some Loomis rods for $70 off. That's the GCX series.
Mm-hmm.
If you like, here's a good one. If you like ice fishing, they have a Humminbird Ice Helix 9 Mega Side Imaging Unit with Mega Live Bundle for just under $1,800, and that retails for $3,100. So that's
almost half off.
Almost half off. Yeah.
All right. I mean, we guys, look, Omnia is a great partner of ours. That's the reason we do plug them a lot. But we also plug them a lot purely because it's really not even a sales pitch. We like to bring you guys deals and bring you things that obviously you can benefit from. This is ridiculous. Like when we talk about the math here, there is no reason to not be a Omnia Pro member.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Right now, because if you use code Series Pro, like you probably heard us in this spiel for weeks. If you use Sirius Pro, when you go to order Omnia Pro, you get $5 off, so $45 for a $50 service. It's one payment per year, so $45 for the year. They automatically throw $50 into your account to go use. You get the 10% rewards on all orders. So if you spend, say, $1,000, you get $100. You go and add on top of that, you can use our discount code still to save another 10%. You get access to these sales, and then they say, hey, we're going to give you this intuitive as hell mapping feature that you can use too, that tells you water temperatures. It has all the wind and storm cells. It has water color on there. It has even you can go back, I think it's 72 hours of history on such. And they're adding even more stuff to this. So there really is no reason not to be. And if you're already a pro member, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And even you can gift this for Christmas time. So it's perfect time to go and gift pro to somebody, slap a Omnia gift card their way, take advantage of this stuff. But definitely do so because it's freaking nuts, the different things that they're doing for people. And shout out to the Omnia crew because they are a giving folk. They are Santa Claus 365 when it comes to their customers.
Ain't that a fact?
That's for sure. But folks, appreciate you guys taking time out to listen and tune into this episode, the full thing, because it was definitely an awesome one. Thanks again to Spencer and Drew for joining us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you guys follow us on social media because we do have some more big shows coming up. If you missed that in the intro, for the folks that are tuning in from the YouTube or the live here, upcoming shows Friday, we are joined by Matt Airy, and we're going to do a full breakdown, go down the rabbit hole of comparing big buck behavior with big bass behavior. That's and how there are actually benefits. I'm so excited for it. And there are benefits to understanding deer and also understanding fish and how those can correlate with each other. We're going to have a whole bunch of different stuff to go through with that, but it's cool. Even if you don't hunt, and this is going to be a really interesting episode. And then next week we got our live stream. Of course, we'll announce later on our social media and on Friday's show who that's going to be with. But next Friday is a mega show. When I mean mega show, we got like literally 10, 12 guests coming on, and we are doing a show completely around the best videographers and photographers in the fishing space. So we got from Jake Latondras to Kyle Van Dever to Tanner Lyons. There's a whole list of them. I don't want to give away the whole gauntlet that we have, but these guys are all badasses in their own right, super creative people, some of the best people that we know in this space. We got our boy Clint Bartlett that's going to help co-host that show and steer that with us. We're going to drop that next Friday for you guys. It's going to be freaking awesome.
It's gonna be so good.
It's going to be great. I'm really excited for it. There's going to be a lot to take away from it, tips, things, some of their stories from the road. So we're going to have a whole mix of it, especially for people that are looking to get into that. They're going to have advice for it, but also we're going to have some fun with it too. So you guys have that to look forward to. And then by that time, it'll be basically almost the end of the year, and we'll have our end of the year episode and episode freaking 500 coming up here soon, which is
What are we at right now?
About.
Like 480 or something?
This was 491.
Oh my god.
Or no, excuse me. This episode right now is 492. So we got 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'll probably be early into January when we have 500. We got to plan that out a little bit and celebrate that. But I don't know if we can handle 2 not so serious shows in a row. That'd be kind of nuts for you to end the year at episode 500. So either way, stay tuned. Follow us on social media, and you guys will see that whole plan coming up here soon. But that'll be a fun one because it'll be a not so serious. So we'll talk some fishing, of course, but get friends of the show on here and have some fun, have a little late night live stream, have some drinks, celebrate the new year, and celebrate 500 freaking episodes of Serious Angling, which honestly is technically more if you want to count fantasy fishing because those will actually go into it. But
yeah, as long as hold on, let me check my calendar, but I don't think it will fall on those days. Yeah, as long as it's not January 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, I can make
9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Technically, so the Tuesday Night Live would be December 24th, and that's a Christmas Eve, and I don't think we're going to do that. So we'll figure out a show for Christmas week. We might take Christmas week off, guys. I'm not quite sure yet.
And then the following Tuesday night will be New Year's Eve.
6. Yeah. Let's see. So it
might
fall
have to do
on
Monday nights.
So it might be mid-January for episode 500. But either way, we'll figure that out. Does that code, Island Bass Pursuit asks, does that code work on Andy's reels, Tranks, and SLT?
I don't know what the SLT is.
I think he means SLX.
He does.
I don't know if the code actually, that's a good thing to call out. I don't know if it works on Shimano stuff because Shimano, I don't think you can use discount codes on.
It doesn't. I think Shimano is the one it does not work on in Megabass. I know Megabass.
But you can, there are pro sales for Megabass and Shimano, as we've just showed you guys.
Which tend to be better than the 10%. So,
yep. And yeah, so obviously the discount codes don't work already on a discounted product, but you still get the rewards from that such product, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But hopefully that answers your question. There's a few brands out there, obviously, that have made it for every retailer. Basically, you can't have discount codes used on them, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, but you got to wait for the sales for some of the certain brands.
And some of them never even go on sale, which is a shame. But
hey, I mean, when you're confident in your product, I mean, they say, don't discount it, right?
Right, 100%.
But either way, hope you guys enjoyed that show. Appreciate y'all. Looking forward to a exciting rest of 2024 and exciting 2025, which have some pretty big things coming that I'm excited to announce to all of y'all. But Andy, appreciate you, homie. Looking forward to a fun week. You guys have some fun content coming this weekend because we actually have Business for the Bass Boat host on the Serious Angler Network. Adam
coming into Buffalo as long as he can get here. So we'll see
if he can get through the snow. But if there's one place that can handle snow, it's freaking Buffalo. So I think we'll be okay. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And maybe we'll do a little in-person show for you guys. Maybe a live stream potentially. We'll see. We'll see what shenanigans we get into with some beer wings and old Buffalo and
who knows.
Talk some fishing. But appreciate y'all. You guys are amazing, and we'll see you on the next one.